The grid method is a strategy employed by artists to help them create stronger compositions and capture realistic scenes on their paper or canvas. Some people call it cheating, some don't. Hi, my name is Carrie, and here on Artist Strong, I help artists like you build your skill and develop your unique artist voice. Today, I want to explore the question, does a grid help or hurt your finished art? The grid method has been used for centuries. In some of the research that I've conducted, I even read some people found it being used during the time of the Egyptians. While I couldn't verify that information, I do know artists of the Renaissance often used this method. During this time period, they created a physical structure where they could string up a grid and then stand it in front of their subject matter. They would then create a comparable grid on their paper or canvas and use it to help them create their compositions and accurately fill the space. We have an example of this with a woodblock image of Albrecht Dürer's grid stand here. The title of that work is Draftsman Making a Perspective Drawing of a Reclining Woman, and it's around 1600 when he made it. And this piece is actually in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection. Today, we often use the grid in a different way. Many of us work from photo reference and place a grid both on our surface and on the image reference that easily corresponds and lines up with one another. I'm currently creating a series of artworks that celebrates unsung women from the 1940s. I found some royalty-free images to work with and decided to use the grid to help me stay close to their resemblance. Here you can see a cropped and gridded image reference of one of my women. Once I create the composition, I tend to crop and adjust my photo references before I use them. I grid it as you see here. I then create a matching grid on my canvas or paper and begin using it to help me match up my squares, as you can see in this next image. After I do this, I generally stray away from using or referring to the grid in terms of outlining my space. I often entirely focus on value instead, and that's what I do when I begin to fill in my underpainting. At this point, most of my lines from the grid are no longer visible, but it helps me lay in the general lights and darks of my image before I begin to refine the artwork. While this work is not finished, you can see it pretty close to finished in the later images I have, and it gives you a good sense of how you can move from a grid to your finished artwork. Now that we've talked a bit about the history of the grid method and witnessed a present-day example of its use, let's talk about its strengths and weaknesses. First off, it's a tool. Tools aren't good or bad. It's how we use them that matters. The grid method can help with capturing likeness from your image reference, with a focus on proportion, prevent you from drawing your object too large or small on the surface, and it can help you make your planning and layout process a lot faster. Potential problems that can come from using the grid method include tightening up your work, get you too caught up in matching your image references and not focused on the goal that you have for the artwork, and the judgment you can face from other makers who see the tool as a cheat. For example, we were not encouraged to use the grid method in our instruction in some of the course content for a high school program I once taught. Here's the thing. That judgment, the last problem I mentioned, is really why we're here today. Too many of us are worried about whether we are good enough, that when people question our methods, we feel inadequate and unworthy of the label artist. I am here to tell you the next time someone questions your use of the grid method, to ask them why a tool used by Renaissance masters is not worth your time or use. And remind yourself why you show up for your art in the first place. There is absolutely no shame in making your art and using all of the tools you have at your disposal. Sometimes I use the grid method, sometimes I don't. It depends on the artwork and my goals for the work. For some works, I know I can draw it quickly and accurately. Other times, I want the grid for additional support. So I'm here to say, do you. I want you, as part of this community, to feel empowered to make the artistic choices you feel called to make. That's how you're going to build your skill and find the voice you seek. This post from Artist Strong is brought to you by the Artist Strong Studio, our community of patrons who believe in and wish to support this community. You can become part of the Artist Strong Studio for a small monthly commitment, and it can be as low as $1 a month. To learn more, visit www.patreon.com/artiststrong. A special thank you to current patrons. I really couldn't do this work without your support. Now, let's start that conversation. What is your opinion? Does grid drawing help or hinder? Tell us how you use or don't use grids in your creative process in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Artist Strong.